46 people.
Mm-hmm.
We are going live.
And we are live.
And we are live.
Oh my God, that's great. Yo, welcome, guys. How are you guys doing? All right. Okay. So we have Matt Cho behind the computer. He will be able to grab all the questions if ever you guys have questions. All you guys can do is just write a few questions onto the chat and we'll read them. What we'll do today is that we are going to go through the questions that you've asked, and then we're also going to talk a lot about resumes because we have heard a lot from you guys, and there's still a lot of things that you guys can improve on for your resume. So I think this is something that's very, very important, especially if you're not getting interviews so far. So those are the two main topics. One, the questions that you've already asked, and two, the resumes. Yeah, so I just want to give a little bit of a welcome and thank you to all of you guys.
And thanks so much for joining. We're really glad to have you guys join us, and we're thrilled to help you and see how we can help you on your journey. This is something that we're learning too as we're trying to figure out what's the best way that we can help you guys. So if you have any feedback on the course materials, let us know where we can, let us know where you need help on, and we're going to be trying to add additional content wherever you think, anything else you want to know.
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you again, because I know for some of you guys, it could be like 8 p.m. or like midnight or 11 a.m. So thank you so much for joining. Just a round of quick introductions. Let me know where you guys are from real quick, and then Matt Cho can read it. And then while we do that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of some updates. We will make a system design interview portion for Tech Interview Pro. So that's great.
Yes.
So this is going to be really, really good. I'm very excited for this course.
Yeah. So the system design interview is something that a lot of you guys, if you're looking for entry-level roles, you're not going to be really quizzed on this too hard. It's really going to be more on like data structures, algorithms, putting some simple app together. But then where the system design interview comes in is really as you're looking for more senior roles. That's where people will ask you things like, how do you build Twitter, right? What are the pieces together? Or how do you put together a complex mobile application? And it's really going to be context dependent on the field that you're in. So we're going to put together some material for you guys, for those of you who may be looking at more medium to senior roles, and get you guys set up there. So we'll be adding that. We are also adding a course
on how to transition from data science to software engineering.
Yes, that's right. So for those of you who are transitioning from one field to another, we've seen that a number of you guys are out there trying to do that. We know some good stories about that. Joma has done that as well. So we have some good tips for you there, and we'll be adding materials.
That's right. And so just looking at the chat, that's pretty cool. Rahul is from Singapore, Ashwini from Florida, Ayaz from Toronto. We have, so mostly like America and also Canada. So that's pretty cool. Eloy from South Texas. That's great. Awesome. Can we have more advice for international applicants? I think, that's a good question. We might add that to the course also, because I see a lot of people asking questions about H-1B visas. So we might add that.
You're international.
I am international. So that's why I think it'll be perfect for me to tell you guys about this. So cool. All right. One more update I just want to talk to you about. I'm not sure if you guys were in the Facebook group when we did I did a mini ad hoc programming contest. I give a question, and then I asked people to solve it, and then I gave the winner like $20. The winner was Nick Doyle. I'm not sure if he's in the live, but let me know if you like that programming contest, because if you do, I might do more, because it's actually kind of fun for me. So let me know in the chat. So so let's go to the resume stuff.
Yeah, sure. So recently, we've been reviewing a lot of your resumes, and a lot of the similar content has been coming up over and over again. So what I've been doing here is I kind of accumulated a set of tips that I think I can offer you guys generally about some of the top common mistakes that I've been seeing. And so I prepared a little bit of material for you guys here. The first one that I want to go over this for you guys, and we'll see what Joma thinks about this as well. But the first one is about the 10-second rule, which is that when I'm scanning a resume, it's called the 10-second rule because you only take a look at your resume for about 10 seconds, and then you pretty much just cut it there and think, what do I think about this candidate at that point? And so
Yeah,
this is
oh, sorry. I think, yeah, the test second role, that makes a lot of sense because in some ways, when you meet people in person, you have a first impression. And that is basically the same concept, but for a resume. They have 10 seconds for your first impression,
yeah.
and that's vital.
Yeah, so a lot of resumes I see in the first half of the resume is completely fluff material. It's not very good. You put the most important material sometimes at the bottom, right? You need to prioritize the resume and tell a good story from the top, front load that top portion of the resume. And the first few words of each sentence, each bullet point needs to be impactful and stress your abilities as a developer. So I will see some resumes where it'll say like, supported something, helped something, documented something, and then they'll say, and I also developed a Python REST API, right? It's better if, as I'm reading through it, I'm just scanning the first few words of each sentence. It's like, developed Python, built a REST API, program something in Java. And then I'm like, yeah, that looks really like a software engineer, instead of seeing like, as I'm starting to try and scan it, there's just a bunch of random words that don't really hit the keywords that I'm looking for. The other thing is I would recommend that the resume flows in structure, right? So a lot of times I'll see a resume that says like, developed Python. Okay, that's good. And then they'll say like, this project was, some B2B enterprise client application for 50,000 clients. It's like, that doesn't flow. Like, it flows if it's like, developed this, built that, implemented this. I'm just like, yeah, this guy's just implementing and developing one after another, instead of saying like, that if that flow gets halted, and then you're switching subjects. You see, like, you're talking about yourself, and then you're talking about what your team did, what your project was, what your company did, and then you go back to another sentence about yourself.
Yeah, the thing that I see the most is like, it's kind of hard for you to write your resume. I know this because like whenever you said that you did something, but they need a lot of context to understand what you did. So one common mistake is saying like, okay, develop REST API for that, but then you describe the whole the whole company or your whole team like effort, and then you're just basically wasting space because they don't care about what your team is doing. They care about what you did, And then if it is hard to do context, sometimes you could shorten it, make it such that it's easy to read. Like, yes, maybe it doesn't encompass everything that you've done or everything that team is doing, but as long as it shows what your skills are, then that's what's important.
Yeah, so this is the key thing, is that a lot of the resume interviewers do get some training, right? And we're taught like, you got to dig in deeper and figure out not what the candidate's team did or what their project was. It's what did the candidate personally contribute as an individual.
Yeah, and then just a little interruption. So Dan Logs, he or she said that at university, I was told that we got to organize resumes in chronological order. Should I just ignore that? So what do you think?
I think it should generally be chronological, but personally, my resume, I don't do chronological. Like, I would do priority order and just put some of the projects I'm most proud about at the top. But it should generally be like, mostly in that order, I would say.
So the reason why most of the time is chronological order is because the most recent thing you do, it's supposed to be the most impressive thing. You're supposed to be growing as you go, right? Like for me, internships, each internship is more and more impressive. So because of that, it is chronological order for me. But for example, back then, when I used to do projects, I would have a project that I did 2 years ago that was a lot more impressive than a project that I did maybe just now or a year ago. Then I would put the one that's way more impressive on top, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Wait, let's answer another question because I think that one's cool. It's a really short one. For entry level, does the education should be on top? Because Google usually insists education to be at the top. Yeah. So for that one, I personally think it doesn't really matter because even if your education is on top or on the bottom, it's pretty easily parsable because people can just like look at education.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to parse. I think if your education is something you're proud about, right? If it's impressive in some way, if you have a lot of, say, activities, honor societies, a good major, some cool coursework that you took, then yeah, you can prioritize that and put that at the top. If there's not much to say about it, or if it's unrelated, then put that at the bottom. If let's say you studied, biology or something, and now you're switching into computer science, then you don't want to focus on that so much.
Yeah.
So it depends.
Yeah. Just think of what the fundamental that we said. The most impressive stuff, keep it at the top. The less impressive stuff, keep it at the bottom.
Someone says, I think it was Ashwani,
Yeah,
says
Ashwani.
moving from DevOps or infra into software engineering or developer roles. How do you make that transition?
Wait, was that the question? Matt, can you go back to the question? Can you please cover moving? Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah. Moving from DevOps to Sweep. Yeah. So do you have any experience with that? I've had some friends that kind of
yeah,
switch.
Well, so generally, at least for a company like Google, software reliability engineer, it's not server administrator. It is very coding focused, right? Like Google will actually use scripts and programming to automate millions of server maintenance tasks. So it's very coding related. And that's generally done in scripting languages like, say, Unix, Python, right? Bash scripts and like Golang. So from that perspective, like coding is extremely necessary, or it should be something that you're at least up to speed on. And if you're up to speed on that, then I'd imagine it would be a simple it would be like a good route to from there if you want to get into software engineering itself as well. I think both are pretty good paths, actually. For software engineering, like here's one thing, right? Like you need to pick a track, right? Nobody goes into software engineering and just says, I'm just going to go do anything that makes money, right? Whatever. Backend web engineer is a pretty decent path for, like, say, a DevOps person, because you're still kind of working with like the backend infrastructure. There's a lot of non-UI work, like Python work that may be involved here, hooking up databases. That actually can hook in well with site reliability engineering, DevOps. If you're trying to jump into, say, JavaScript front-end web development, that's not really playing to your strengths in that scenario.
So I think usually for these questions, like, how do I transition from this to that, this to this, it's really hard to give you exactly what you should do, because it really depends. We would have to know exactly what you did at your previous job. The thing is, every job is different, even if they have the same title. Like, even, for example, software engineer, there's like mobile software engineering, and then there's machine learning software engineering. Those things require really different skills and really different tech stack. So what you have to do is you have to look into your own resume in terms of what did you do as a DevOps, what are the matching skills, and then find what is the closest area that is software engineering. And then if there's a track that you really want to get to, because usually that's what you care about, there's a specific track that you want to get to, then what you want to know is, how do I get there? What are all the skills that I get there? And what are the closest skills that I need or that I have to get there? And then what you do is, slowly but surely, you go into positions that get closer and closer to that track that you want.
Yeah, I highly recommend building upon your strengths in some way, right? Like if you know some skill, like math or something, don't just throw that out. See if you can find a job, like, say, a software engineering job that's somewhat math related, and then that can just give you that upper edge as you're trying to get into a software engineering role, if that's what you're going for. And it may take a few job transitions, right? Like you may need to do a little bit slowly. It may take 2 or 3 job jumps for you to get to the ideal dream role that you're looking for. But if you try to just make a complete jump from your current field in, say, math or biology or whatever into full-fledged software engineer, that could be, and say it's not even related, that could be a little tough.
Cool. All right, back to the resume, because we don't have that much time.
I wanted to cover the description. Okay, so the second point here I want to mention is that your descriptions, I've read a lot of them, and they need to tell a story, right? So a lot of you guys are just you're listing a laundry list of things that you've implemented, just a bullet list of points, like I implemented X version 2. I implemented Y in Sprint Spark version 3. I implemented Z using the GeoLadder version 2. That just doesn't say anything, right? So, and the other thing is, a lot of people, they don't even mention what other relevant skills that they used in these implementations. A lot of these may just be proprietary technologies that cannot carry over to other companies, right? So it doesn't matter to me if I'm just reading a laundry list of things and none of them really stand out. When you tell a story, and this is something that all Google engineers I know at least will be taught, that during their own performance reviews, they must tell a story. The story is crafted to have your accomplishment, the challenge, and then the result. So this is 3 pieces that you need. And I would apply that to your resume as well. So instead of going for quantity of bullet points, have a few very good, solid points that are highly memorable that people want to talk to you more about. And you need to qualify that list. So explain what was the challenge of that. You implemented this. Fine. What was the challenge? Why do you deserve credit for that? And the other thing is, so for example, ways to illustrate the challenge is you could say, it was on a tight timeline. You had to collaborate with 4 people and cross-functional teams. You had to communicate with a lot of people. You had to teach yourself 2 new programming languages, right? You had to interact with a bunch of different interfaces. There was a complexity, ambiguity in the project. You had to take initiative and lead something. All of these are good skills. But if you just say you implemented it, it doesn't tell the whole story. And then the validation part, the result, is absolutely essential because many people, they'll read a resume and a lot of it just looks like BS. There's no way to know if any of this is true. The result is when you say you implemented this, and as a result, you had the whole company started adopting your framework, right? Or maybe you sped up the performance of the app or something by 50%. You saved on lines of code, managed to reduce the code app size footprint. Maybe you just launched and got some good press in the news. Maybe you just have a website and now people can go check out this website. I've seen a lot of people, they'll just list like 10 pet projects, not a single link to a website or GitHub or anything. You okay? Yeah. So I'm just wondering, like, if you list all these pet projects and I don't see a single link to any of this stuff, was any of this really worth doing, right? Was it worthwhile?
Yeah. Cool.
So less is more, in my opinion. The other thing I want to mention is, I kind of touched on this a bit earlier, is that it's not about your accomplishments. Like, you've accomplished a lot, and that's fine, but you cannot carry any of those accomplishments to your next role. So instead of saying that you launched the terabyte, Exion, which means nothing to me, tell me, what was it about your personality that helped you launch that? Right? So in a resume, it is about the story about yourself and your personal individual accomplishments as a contributor, and not about how great your company was, how great your team was, how great your project was, that maybe all you did was help assist something, right? You helped launch this amazing project that reached 50 million people. But if all you did was help, that doesn't tell the story about what you did.
I'm so sorry.
Let's see. We got a question here. Does university name have any impact on wine recruiters? From Brandon Lee.
Yeah. So I think university name, unfortunately, like maybe it doesn't wow recruiters, but it definitely like filters, especially for companies who are big enough that they can filter in different things. Not gonna lie, if you have like Harvard, Yale, and stuff like that on your resume, they will more likely read your resume, especially for internships. Once you've had a few experience, like full time, then it really doesn't matter because they care less about your school. Like I said, they care more about recently what you did. So if you've done, really good jobs at like Facebook, Google, then they'll look at that, even if you went from a no-name school.
So you went to Waterloo, which is fairly well known.
Yeah.
But it's not. I know you didn't get into like Google straight out of.
Yeah, no.
Like you had to do a number of internships, right?
Yeah, like I went to work for a bank. Oh, okay. Well, for me, it's a little different case. I mean, I got lucky on my second internship, and I went to Citadel already. For people who don't know, Citadel is a pretty big hedge fund, and it's pretty good. But for most of my friends, they do Canadian startup companies for the longest time. Like for their first for internship.
Yeah.
They never get to California yet. Like for us as Canadians, we always wanted to come to California. That was our dream, is to come work to California. But yeah, my friend, I think they went like startup number 1, startup number 2, and then maybe some weird startup at San Francisco, and then they went to NVIDIA and then to Google, right? This is kind of like a path.
Yeah, I mean, even for me, I came out of UC Berkeley, which is well known. Even a lot of my classmates, they did not get into top tier tech companies. A lot of them actually dropped out, right? They couldn't get jobs. I know some people who became bartenders or switched out of the major because it's still not guaranteed to get a job straight out of college just based on that, which is why doing those internships, getting coursework projects, right? That is essential. And especially as you're starting out, it's hardest at the beginning. When you've got nothing, like after you've gotten your first 2 internships, right? It's easy then, right? You just snowball into better and better companies until you start interviewing with top tier tech companies. But that first internship, I think, is very difficult. How did you get your first?
Well, because I was at Waterloo, we had this system. And because we have this system, it's a bit easier to apply to companies. But a lot of people don't get any job, even if they have that system. The reason why I was able to get a job was that I really focused on one thing.
Yeah.
And that one thing was finance tech, right? Like every one of my project and competition was related to finance tech. For example, one, I built like a bot that would trade Bitcoin stuff, right? So, and then it's on a site that is related to betting, because I was basically betting prices of gold. And then it's basically, you basically use like Black-Scholes model and stuff like that. I had a lot of help from my brother. So you got to use like resources and stuff like that, right? So I did that. And then I went to a trading competition called RITC. It's not exactly technical. Like you don't do like, yeah, you could write like Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that, write macros. But basically it shows initiatives, right? And I also did like investment banking competition. But you just do as much as you can. And then on the side, you practice your data structure and stuff like that.
So here's the thing, right? Nobody is self-made. Joma got help from his brother, right? For his start, right? I got help from my aunt, right? She was working at a large tech company. She got me an internship. And I think that's the mindset you need to have. When you're starting out, it really helps to have some connections, reach out to your network or extended network and see if you can get anybody who's willing to give you just a small chance, right? Give you a shot. And if you can get that, then that can snowball you up. Without that, if you just try and do it all by yourself on your own, it's just uphill. Let's see. Should we move on?
Yeah.
I wanted to mention another thing I've seen on a lot of resumes is that you need to show and not tell. So, a lot of people, they'll just say like, I'm hardworking, I can communicate, I have teamwork, I'm passionate. Well, if you're so good at communication, then you should be able to have examples to explain how you put on some presentation or mentored other people, right? If you're hardworking, you should be able to explain that through an example about how you stayed up all night to launch a project. Or if you're passionate, then you have a bunch of pet projects to show for that. So this is about like, don't just tell people this stuff because everyone has their BS glasses on. They're just trying to check each word, like, how can I qualify this? Is this really real? When you show and not tell, that just makes it much more concrete. The other point here I want to mention is people won't click on a lot of your links, I would say.
On your resume?
Yeah. I mean,
sometimes they print it, so they can't click
it.
Yeah,
it's usually printed. So I've seen sometimes people will have a project or something, and they just list the website, and they think that that should be self-explanatory. And then they actually don't talk about the project so much because they assume that the link is going to have more than enough descriptions of like content about that. But you really need to take everything from that description and put it in the resume and make that self-standing on its own. And it may also help actually, if you're the type of person who has like 5 links on your resume, make a single website, like a personal website, yourname.com, and then put those links on there and make a nice portfolio website such that people just only need to go to that one website if they're interested. And when people go to these websites, it better look good. I've seen a number of resumes, like I thought, okay, this candidate looks promising. He may be good, or she may look good. She may be good. And then I actually visit their GitHub, and it's just a junk pile of like bad projects, nothing really there, empty. And that just ruins my confidence in this person. At that point, I just think, why am I even interviewing this person? Why would I even talk to this person?
Yeah, like if you have really good projects with really clean code, then yeah, link them to it. But sometimes I've gotten away with just not linking them. But if I'm able to talk through them during the interview and describe in details how I did certain things, then that is good too. I personally don't put that much on my GitHub. So yeah. Anyways, cool. Should we move on to the questions, or you have more stuff about resume?
Yeah, I have a few more points on this. I'll tell you what you do just to save up on some time, because we want to get to the Q&A. I will put this in the document and post it for you guys. So look for that in the descriptions. So this will be a guide on resume tips, the top tips and mistakes that I've seen. Highly recommend you guys check it out and use that to polish up your resumes. All right.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to go through the questions that you guys asked on Facebook. And then the top question was the general approach in solving LeetCode problems / should you ever look at the answers if you're stuck for a very long time? So first, I'll kind of describe what I did, and then I'll talk about what you should do. But usually what I did is a little bit aligned with that. So what I did, especially when I transitioned from data science to software engineering, it really depends how much time you have. Because what I did in the beginning, I had a lot of time because I decided to quit data science like 2-3 months earlier. Like I already had the mindset that I was going to quit. So I had a lot of time. So because I have a lot of time, I was able to spend a lot more time on each problem. So think of it as this way. There's 2 ways of doing it. If you take really long to solve a problem, then you practice struggling on a problem, because these are mental exercises, right? Because if you don't struggle, you're never gonna be able to like solve new questions. So you're gonna work out this part of your brain. And then the other part of your brain is literally just pattern recognition. By doing a lot of these questions, you're going to kind of remember the style. You're going to be like, oh, this question makes sense. It's a graph question, or this question is a Q question. And then you're able to recognize those. It won't really help you practice thinking hard, but it'll help you recognize a lot. So there's 2 things that you have to balance. One, doing problems and taking long to do them. And the second one is doing many problems. And that's a balance that you have to figure out. So for me, when I had a lot of time, I had like 3 months to prepare, I would spend like 1 hour on a problem. And I would spend 1 hour. And if I really can't do anything for 1 hour, like I didn't even figure out the brute force solution, then I peek at the answers, right? I kind of like squint and peek at it. So either how you can do is you could check what the topic is of this question, because sometimes on LeetCode, it tells you the topic. For example, if it says dynamic programming, so that will give you a hint. You're like, okay, so I probably have to use dynamic programming. Or if it says hash map, you're like, oh, wait, okay, I have to do hash map. So then you start thinking again. You try to solve it on your own. And then the other peek that you could do is you could kind of peek at the solution to see what the time complexity is. So if they say like, oh, it's an O n log n, so you're like, oh, it's probably something like binary search, or like, oh, it gives you a hint on how to improve it, right? So that's usually what I do. I take 1 hour, and if I really can't solve it, then I peek at the question. And then if you just can't do that anymore, then yes, just look at the answer, but make sure you understand the answer. Don't just look at it and say, oh yeah, of course. No, look at the answer, understand it, close the tab, and then code it up on your own. Don't just say like, oh yeah, of course, that's how I did it, and then you move on to the next one. No, close the answer, and try to with the answer, try to code it up. If you still can't code it up, keep doing it, because it means you don't fully understand the problem.
Yeah, I think it definitely is a balance that you have to take. It depends on where you are, I would say. Like for myself, I know how to code fairly well, right? So I'm more interested in the breadth of problems and just try to see as many as I can. Because I probably can solve most of them, right? So I take a look at as many as I can. And the other thing is that once you do see a solution, you have to remember it's not so much about the solution, right? Many people know the solution. A lot of it is also about how you arrive at that solution. You can try writing the solution in another way. Like if you see the answer and it's like, okay, that's recursive, see if you can write it in an iterative way, or see if you can write it in a object-oriented way, right? Many times the solutions that I've seen, they wouldn't pass actually because they're not object-oriented enough. Maybe it's just a recursive one, and I know that, hey, there's actually a faster, better iterative version that I know I would want a candidate to be able to code up. And that can also be challenging for you to try to come up with these alternate solutions and think about, what's the time space complexity of this stuff, right? See if you can figure that out too. Yep.
Cool. Yeah, and then kind of like going back from what I said, if I had a lot of time, then yeah, I would take more time. But if the interview is in like 1 week, what I would do is I would spend at most 30 minutes on each question, because that's probably what you'll get like during the interview. They'll give you maybe 30 minutes to answer it. And then if I can't do it, then yeah, I just read the solution and then I re-implement it, right? So now I'm optimizing on breadth. I'm trying to get a sense of all kinds of question. And you have to remember, like, it's kind of like your brain is kind of like a database or kind of like a cache, and you're just trying to fill it in as much as possible so that when you're in the interview, you could just like hit your cache real quick and then give that answer. Yeah. So so think about this balance. Now, I don't know if you guys care about this, but I'm gonna talk about like not just about should I look at the answers or questions. I'm going to talk about like what's the balance, right? What's the balance in learning? For example, should I do a lot of dynamic programming and stuff like that? I mean, usually this is really difficult because it depends on the company, because some companies like to ask like graph questions more and stuff like that. But let's talk about how you would start LeetCoding. So if you haven't done LeetCode yet, what I suggest you to do is first learn the fundamentals. That can be through cracking the coding interview or like your basic data structure class in school. Anything that teaches you like linked lists, queues, stacks, and stuff like that. Or actually, no, just in our course, because we go over it, hash maps and stuff like that. And then once I do understand these things, I will try to balance questions that are like 50% easy, 45% medium, and maybe just like 5% hard, right? Like I don't think the hard ones are ever asked in interviews. They're
Yeah,
very
I don't
rare.
do hard ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, even tech lead does not do hard questions. But yeah, and then
I think they're generally too involved, and yeah, it's just too involved.
Like maybe only the popular ones, like LRU cache. That one's popular, But yeah, and then so here's like the best way to do these questions if you have time. So the best way to study to maximize like how efficient you are. So what I do is okay. So first I have a question. I read the question, and then I talk through it. Like I physically talk to myself, and I try to answer the question from brute force to optimal, right? Because you keep talking, because that would kind of simulate what you would actually do in a real interview, right? The best way to practice is to simulate exactly what you would do in a real interview. So I talk through it. I physically speak to it. I also put a timer for 45 minutes because that's usually how much time I have. And then I use a pen and a paper, and I have the algorithm in mind. Like I talked through it already, and then I write it in pen and paper. So you can't even erase. So that's like hard mode. And then I write it down. And then once I'm done with the algorithm, your paper, that code should be bug free, right? And then once it's bug free, you literally copy what's on your paper to LeetCode, and then you run it to see if it works. That's usually how I study for each question. I don't just like, I don't just like type it out and say nothing and then press run, doesn't work. Modify your code, press run, doesn't work. You're not going to have that environment.
Actually, I want to tell you a story. Like there's a guy I had of a colleague who last week applied to Airbnb. He works at Fang, and he got rejected straight at the phone interview stage, which is like, it's ridiculous, right? Like because he should be more than qualified. And I think what happened to him, I heard, was that he was doing like Objective-C, iOS type of stuff, and then he didn't know a string method. So there's some string library or something like that, which he wasn't using, and then it just caught him off guard. But he's like ACM programmer, like competitive programmer. Yeah.
What the hell?
So I think probably like one thing is maybe like, well, yeah, maybe you're good on the computer, but if you're not writing it, number one, if you're not familiar with the language, and number two, if you're not actually writing it on paper such that you have that environment, like I think he got stressed as well, like over the phone trying to code this stuff up. So if all you're doing is like, going through 200 LeetCode questions or something like that, it's very different than if you're to write on pen and paper.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Why don't we go to a few questions here?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's see. Is there any question that was related to coding, especially? Actually, we can go for old questions too.
Yeah.
Like Mitch Rodriguez, they asked, "How's GPA inclusion? Is it not including it a red flag? -3.2 undergrad and 3.4 master so far."
I would say like
I don't include. I mean, I include it if it's good, but if it's not, I don't. What about you?
I think like mine is high, so I include
Mine's high too.
Like if it's good, I would include it. Sometimes recruiters will ask you to include it. I will actually, if I'm reviewing a resume, I'll actually kind of look for that if it's there, or if it looks good. Like anything you can say to make your okay. So the worst thing to have for your education portion is a one-liner, right? You've got to have. You spent 4 years, right? There should be something there. Activities, honor societies, clubs, some cool coursework, maybe like bulk it up a bit. And this was another point that I wanted to mention is like fully spell out your school's name and the degree you have. A lot of people just shorten that, or they barely put a thought into formatting it to look nicely. Mitch Rodriguez says his GPA master's is 3.4. I think that's decent, right? Like, if you can inflate it through additional coursework or like, right, non-major work or through a master's program or something like that, or maybe you can only list, right, like the master's GPA or whatever, that's going to just make it look better, right? If you can do that.
GPA, yeah. I mean, my friend Cyrus doesn't include it. He's the guy with the 2.9 GPA.
Yeah, if it's low, just maybe just say you joined the honor society, and that may be good enough.
Yeah, or something like that. Cool.
All right.
All right. Yu Xiang Ho. Should I try to do more mock interviews instead of only lead coding? Sometimes I really do not know how an interviewer let you pass or not. So I think the context of this question is that a lot of people, they think they do well during the interview, but then they don't get an offer. And it's also hard because the recruiter doesn't tell you why you failed, right? So hopefully, since you're on the other side of the interview process, can you tell us more about how come some people think they do well, but then they don't?
I think we also covered this somewhat in the course, right? Which is that a lot of it is based on how you solve it, whether you're able to explain it completely. I've heard of some people like they will fail even though they solved everything. And it could be that your communication was no good. Maybe you're a jerk. Maybe you can't really explain the problem. I have had a candidate come in before. She came in, solved the problem, the whiteboarding question I gave her completely, like perfect. And but she didn't say a single word throughout it. She didn't analyze it, didn't come like I asked for the time-space complexity and she was like, linear. It's linear. That's right. But that was it. And if there's no discussion on analysis, then I think you cannot get a passing score, which is why in the course we explain like it's not so much about like lead coding and solving that question alone gets you 1 point out of 4, right? Coding, say, or like the algorithm data structure and analysis portion. But there's like design, which is about suggesting alternatives, the coding portion, which is about like whether you have an object-oriented programming, your code is structured, you have clean API methods. There's the communication portion, which is like if you're able to coherently explain your thoughts and get along with the person and collaborate, which is extremely important in large tech companies, right? Because there's so many people that you have to work with. You may notice, for example, that both Joma and I communicate fairly well, right? We're able to talk, and we seem like decent, like sociable guys, yeah, despite being antisocial. But like, you need to be able to exhibit qualities like that. If you just go in and if you're not doing that, then that could be another thing. Time efficiency, right? If you think you've nailed this problem and you spend the whole 45 minutes just perfectly writing each line because you think you nailed it, you still fail because you were just taking way too long. So as far as mock interview goes, one thing is, if you can come off and present yourself looking good, like in a way that you're able to communicate well and analyze it, you can do this through, for example, what I like to do is I will actually write on paper a bunch of stories I want to say, bullet points, and prepare almost like a little mini speech in my head before interviews. Yeah. And then that allows me to go in and be able to have that communication portion down. Because it takes time and work to prepare a good story about yourself. You can't just come up with it. You have to. Preparation is the key to success.
I also want to kind of share a framework that I have for anything, like almost anything in life, right? Like, always put yourself in their shoes. Imagine if you're the interviewer. What kind of person would you pass? You want to pass people that you want to work with well, right? So that's why, yes, sometimes you could answer the question like really well. But if you come off as an asshole, or like if you don't communicate well, then it doesn't matter. They don't want to work with you. So yeah, just always pretend that what would they like to see, and then think of it that way. Cool. Let's go through some of these questions, and then let's go through them a little bit quicker. So Synthesia Ken asks, does it help to do a full-time master's in the US to get a F1 OPT visa to work in big tech in the US? Actually, from my experience, from my friends, because I have a lot of friends who do bachelor's in China, like in Tsinghua University, and then they come here for Carnegie Mellon for master's, and then they get a job straight out of college. So I think it does help. I mean, if you can, definitely do it, and then choose a good school, like a good brand name school, and then that'll be really good. And hopefully you did really well in undergrad. So yeah, all right.
Yeah, I might mention I have a cousin in Taiwan, and he's like a genius. And then he applied to MIT, and the one school, and he didn't get in. So then he delayed his college. And anyway, later on, he came by for like a school in Texas, and also master's program. And then while he was here, he began applying to his ego is so big. He only applied to like Google and Facebook, and that was it. And at the time, I was at Groupon, and I said, "Hey, I can refer you into Groupon if you'll take it." And he was like, "No, I only want Google or Facebook." And he didn't get either of those, and then he just gave up after a while. He dropped out of his PhD program and he went back. But that does seem like a path. Like, he almost made it. And I know a number of colleagues who they came in through, say, like a master's or PhD route, and you don't have to finish that program if you don't want to.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he was going to ever finish that PhD program. If he got a job, he would probably just have.
Yeah, and then more of an immigration side. If you have an F1 visa, you have more time before you need to get your H1B. So that's really good because you can actually work during your F1 visa while you're still at work, while they process and help you get H1B. But that's only for immigrants in the chat. Anyways, so Ashkara Ving asks, how much time do you have to explore each candidate on the web? I think that's for when they ask you saying like, oh, you're checking GitHub and stuff like that. Usually they don't check that much, but.
Yeah, I mean, so the people who interview you, it's not in my job description to interview you, right? I don't get anything out of it, almost nothing out of it. And most engineers view interviewing as a complete waste of time, because you can't write that on your performance review. Like, you can say that you interviewed like 50 people this quarter or something, and that's about it. But it's much more impactful for engineers to be able to say that they shipped the project. So many people will just not even interview, which is why many times I've seen, like, if I get an interview, or a resume, it is like the last priority. And if I might take a look and see, okay, I have an interview coming up. in 5 minutes. I'll read it in the last 5 minutes. And occasionally, if I have time, then maybe I'll be like, okay, yeah, maybe like this candidate actually looks pretty cool. Let me check out their GitHub in 2 minutes and see what's going on there. Or if they have an app, I might try and check that out. If I'm feeling like I have more time, then I will spend more time, which is why kind of I mentioned earlier the 10-second rule. Like your resume needs to shine right away. And you can't count on people to just be clicking on these links. It may even help if you go in and like if you've got something really cool, you can bring your like a demo, a website, or like an app or something, and just quickly show it. Don't consume too much time on it, but if you have something to quickly show, it would actually make you far more memorable, in my opinion. All right, next one.
Cool. Quick questions. How much time? Oh no, sorry. Hitesh Sai asked, using inbuilt libraries for Python for interviews. Usually, what I do, I mean, if you've LeetCoded enough, you kind of know which Python libraries you can use, but I would just use any of them. And then if they say, no, you can't use it, then don't use it, right?
I would be careful about, like a lot of problems are built without expecting you to use built-in libraries. Like you're supposed to actually manually try and solve some of this stuff. If you come up with a 2-liner that solves it, you better know the time-space complexity, for one, right?
Yeah.
And then because if someone says, okay, well, you use this thing, you know the time-space complexity, right? You're pushing this into production. You know the performance implications. And then at that point, if you say, well, I don't know, that's going to make you look bad. The other thing is there's often follow-ups. So they say, okay, you did that. Second part, let's see if you can expand this to multiple cores, right? Distributed system. You know, the built-in isn't built for that. So that can catch you off guard, I would say. So I would be a little careful about that.
Cool. Yeah. And then Jason C asks, for junior JavaScript roles, do you think we should focus more on data structure and algorithms or more JavaScript theory, such as hoisting and callbacks? Well, can I answer this?
Yeah.
So it really depends. Are you like applying for startups, or do you want to get into like FANG? Because if you get into FANG, you don't apply for a language role. That doesn't make any sense. You don't apply for a certain language. Like this is the biggest misconception that people who are not very experienced in like hiring, in like getting jobs, that they think they think your role is related to your language. It's like, oh, I'm a C++ developer. That's not how you should think of yourself. You should think of yourself as like, you know, someone that solves problems. It's not like, oh, I'm a C++ guy, so I do C++. Don't think about that, right? So I'm not sure what exactly you mean, but if it's a startup and you want to work with JavaScript only, then yeah, they'll ask you some JavaScript questions. But if you want to get into FANG, yeah, you should work on data structures and algorithms so that you can pass the interview.
Yeah, often FANG companies will have so much proprietary infrastructure and frameworks anyway that it's not even standard coding languages anymore, right? Like it's like Objective-C at FANG, it doesn't look the same. It's completely different because you're just using tons of other in-house libraries. And probably same for like JavaScript as well. It's like, yeah, maybe you're using normal callbacks, but at Google, say they're using the Promise, right, toolkit or something like that. So, but I do agree, like startups, though, they're going to want you to be able to hit the ground running much faster. And if you can show, at least for any front-end engineer, I would say like familiarity with frameworks. Trendy frameworks, you know, like Vue.js, Angular, React, all of that stuff is going to be skills that highlight your ability to learn quickly as a front-end engineer, which I think is probably one of the key traits.
All right. Because we don't have that much time left, we're going to give you 2 choices. We can either answer more of the questions that you asked on the chat, or we can answer the questions that were on Facebook, the ones that are already listed, and then we'll go top from bottom. So tell me, which one do you want? Do you want us to answer chat questions or Facebook questions? And then we'll give you like 2 minutes to vote. So, and then while we wait, I'm just going to drink some water. Okay, Facebook questions.
They want Facebook questions. Okay.
Cool. All right, let's go to the Facebook questions. Let's see if it has updated. But from the last time I saw, it should be still the same ones. Okay, yeah, it's the same one. Okay. So the next question is how to network with recruiters properly over time. Do you send an email every month? I don't know about you, but for me, I definitely do not email them every month because that sounds kind of annoying. Only email them if you're planning to start interviewing with that company right away. Right. So how I manage my relationship with recruiters is that whenever I do interviews at other companies and I decide not to get the job or I even fail the interview, you still have the connection with the recruiter. You still have their emails, right? Because they coordinate with you. Yep. So just always be polite with them. Don't burn bridges. And then in the future, once you get better, and they know that you will get better, you will get, like, yes, you might fail the interview now, but in the future, you will get better. So you can reach out to them and say, hey, I would like to get an interview. I want to try again. I think I'm ready or whatever. And then, yeah, and then they'll give you usually an interview. So, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, recruiters are used to managing long lists of clients. So they'll get you taken care of whenever you're ready.
Like you have to remember, they don't use their brain to remember you. They have a database, and they remember you through like interviews that you've done.
Let's see if we can get through more questions quickly so we can cover these.
That's true. Yep. Side projects. How do you know if it's the right one if you're just starting? Yeah, for me, I think that there's not really a right one, right? Because I'm having an assumption now. I'm assuming that you're doing these projects so that you could land a job at like FANG or something. So in that case, the right project is the one that gets you an interview. And which one gets you an interview, that depends on the company, right? Most FANG companies, maybe if you just do like a normal backend REST API front end and the database kind of project, that would be good enough. Like good enough as in like that's what they kind of look for. They want you to know how to go full stack. But then if the company specifically has like a requirement for a specific tech stack, like if they say, oh, we use PHP only, or like we use Python only, then do a project that mimics what their requirements are.
Yeah, I need to mention here, like I think you need to be focused in your career strategy and the way you navigate it, because a lot of people just randomly do stuff. You need to take a look at, like, spend a moment to take a look at the jobs website and see the specific roles that people are asking for and the skills that they want. Like if you go off and build a 3D game, you're not getting into FANG because FANG does not care about 3D games. For me, like I happened to get into iOS development, which was a skill that FANG companies really wanted at the time. And so that was a very easy path in. Android development is pretty hot these days, right? Like there's not enough Android engineers. There's a few other tracks, like web development is a pretty solid one for FANG. It's not solid if you want to become a game engineer. So it depends on what you're looking for. So a few tracks, right? Like front-end development, which is how our friend Clement from AlgoExpert, he got in because he became a JavaScript engineer. Pretty simple, easy path, great for junior engineers. No senior engineer seems to really stay as JavaScript engineer, but there's plenty of junior roles for that. There's backend like REST API, Python stuff. But you need to be building the REST API and having like a client server infra. There's the whole Android stack, the iOS stack. And then there are like specialty areas, right? Like you could become a machine learning person, AI, VR, like DevOps, graphics. So there are those other fields that you can also tackle depending on what your interest is. But as you find these projects, the one thing that you do want to make sure is that, number one, you're interested in it and that it does lead you towards an upwards path, right? If you go off and you get really good at building regular expressions in Perl, there's no path for that, even though it may allow you to launch a pretty neat project.
All right, next question. How to find a proper mock interviewer or assess a mock interview by yourself? Yeah, so hopefully, I mean, if you're in computer science, find your computer science friends who are also applying for these companies. I mean, the best would be someone who's already more experienced than you, like seniors, people who had internships there. Yeah. That's the best. But I mean, if you guys are both noobs, then what you can do is at least know your DS and algo. like data structure and algo, and then let one of them read the question and answer, understand it, and then ask the question.
I think you can also use our group, right? Like post in the group and see if you can find each other to, do some practice.
Yeah. Someone mentioned, Sunil mentioned, it would be cool if we have a system where we could like interview each other within, but like, I don't know how to make a system. I mean, you could just message them, I guess, for now. Just message them,
sure,
right? And then video chat each other, I think. But I'll think about it.
Yeah, feel free to post in the group. It's for you guys to organically use it as you wish.
Exactly.
All right.
And then we have, so we still have a lot. So we may not go through all of them, but I'll try to do as fast as possible. So how to answer, what would you bring to this company? How to answer this question. What would you bring to this company without being generic with, I'm hardworking, I learn fast, I have X standard skills. Like basically behavioral question. I mean, we have a whole section on that on our course. So
yeah, I think this kind of goes back to earlier what I mentioned, where you need to show and not tell. And if you can just show that component, like, I hate it when people tell me that, like, I'm passionate. I'm so passionate. I'm really passionate. Like, that's what a candidate told me one time. It's like, where are your pet projects? If you have that stories to tell to back it up, it's going to make you look good. And also just having the initiative to take on more projects, like building some of these pet projects is going to fill out your resume, and it's going to show when the time comes.
Cool. And the next question, that one hits hard. Dealing with anxiety when solving coding problems, like during practice and at interviews. So during practice, I think the hardest thing for me is to get started. I mean, what I did was I literally just scheduled on my calendar like 30 minutes where I just do coding for at least once a day to get me started and to become a habit. I mean, it's not fun. It's really hard because you get kind of depressed if you don't do well, even when you're practicing.
How do you deal with it during the interview?
Yeah, so that one is also hard. For me, once I do well in an interview, you don't get anxiety anymore, right? So the one thing that I do is I pretend it's a friend. And we're having a fun conversation. And if you can if you could even trick your mind saying like, I don't even want this job, I don't really care, it kind of takes the pressure off. It's a lot better if you already have a job offer in line. Then like once you have a job offer in line, you actually do so well in interviews because you don't care, right? So when you don't care, you actually do way better because you don't have like the stress. But if you don't have a job offer, just remember, this is not the end of the world if you mess up. And then remember, they actually want to interact with you. Ask questions. If you're blocked, ask questions. Interact with them. You don't have to be perfect. It's not about being perfect in these interviews.
Yeah, I would say one approach I take is I would view it as if, like, oh, wow, interesting. This is a question I never heard about, and it's actually pretty challenging.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Like, here's a new one, right? And then you can take a curious approach to it and say like, well, this sounds similar to this other problem that I may have approached before. The other thing I like to do is I take a step back instead of banging my head against trying to solve a problem. And I'll think, well, imagine that this were my own startup, my own pet project, and I had to solve this. What approach may I take? What heuristics might I try here? And see if I can come up with something close, say 80% of the way. Some of these problems, they're purposely like just difficult, right? Maybe sometimes the interviewer just asks something that doesn't have a really great solution in the first place. Like we heard, actually, there was a story on the Facebook group. Some guy got asked the Google phone question. Super hard. Like I asked 3 colleagues, nobody knew the answer to this one. Like there was no good optimal solution. It would have been, there's one like that's very extremely tricky on Wikipedia later, what we found out. But like for phone interviews, for example, like if you can just come up with, say, the brute force solution and give a proper analysis of it, that could be all that they're looking for. That could just be enough to get you through. And then maybe later on, there may be a follow-up to see if you can poke around towards the more optimal solution here and there.
Cool. And then the next question was, how long after signing a contract for a job should you wait before looking for a new job? And then it was by Grace Chan. And she said, some context to my question. It's because she had a very smart friend that started a job that that person did not really like, but they had a baby, so they had to pay the bills. But then he also did not want that job because it's kind of like a shitty average pay data viz job, and he wants to be a true data science. And then he is afraid that if he quits too early, it would look bad on his resume. So let me tell you something. I quit BuzzFeed within 5 months. That was my first full-time job. And I'm fine. I worked at Facebook and now I work at Fang. It's totally fine.
Yeah, I think I quit Groupon within like 4 months or so. I was just done. And there was another offer that I just reneged on later on.
Yeah, it's more like don't do this like 4 times in a row.
I think you got to put it this way. Like, if you plan to put this on your resume, actually, then you want to have some, at least say 6 months, I would say would be good. If you've only been working like a month or two and you want to leave, like it's not even going on your resume. You can just
that's true.
You can just move on and do the next thing.
Yeah. Like if you could land the next job and you think that you'll stay at you think that the next job you'll enjoy, then apply whenever you want. Apply when you're ready.
How to not quit your job. Yeah, check that out.
Oh yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Oh, that was it. Wait, isn't that an old video?
There's an old video I did on that.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, that's the time for today, unfortunately. Lots of great questions. What you could do is, if we did not answer your questions, feel free to, next time we're going to make another poll and then put your questions there. And then if it's a very good, relevant question that a lot of people would also ask, vote for it. And then we will see it at the top. So
yeah, you can also continue to ask questions in the Facebook group. I will have my resume tips linked for you as well.
Cool. All right. So thank you for coming to our first live video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was useful.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's good.
We will continue improving our live streaming
will.
process as well, so we can maybe put some presentations on for you guys next time.
Yeah. Feel free to give us some feedback. Put some comments on our announcement.
Long live the tech lead.
Yeah. Long live
That's
the tech
great. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Aniket. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, David. Thank you, Igor. Thank you, Tanvi. Thank you, Leon. Thank you, Ingu. Thank you, Synesthesia. All right.
We will see you in 2 weeks.
See you later.
See you.